Really?
Oh.
Oh.
Not even on the subway or the buses.
I think
I haven't been on the subway.
here in Moscow, like we're prohibited from entering the subway without, mask and like protection.
Yeah.
And gloves. I mean, the gloves. Gloves are mandatory. I struggle to understand the reason for that. Well, apart from promoting some gloves producers, or whatever. So, yeah, the rules are quite strict here in Moscow.
So it's 5 p.m. in Moscow, and we have 3 attendees already who have joined our video session. Shall we wait a bit more, like for 2-3 minutes? What do you think?
Yeah, I think let's wait like 2 minutes, maybe more. And then we can start.
Patricia, if it's fine with you.
Yeah, I'm flexible with anything. Huh? Are schools open in Moscow?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's open for high school. High school is definitely open, and it's not for the primary school. And I'm not sure about this middle classes.
How about university?
Sorry?
How about the university?
Well,
it depends.
It depends. Yeah, it really depends on the university. And for example, the Moscow State is closed. And I saw some news yesterday that some students even filed a suit for against remote studies. Yeah, but it's not prohibited. Like the universities are not legally prohibited from continuing work and physically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
what about Sweden? Everything is online, or?
Yeah. So now the government came out the other day and said that now we're not allowed to have more than 8 people in any public space, like at a restaurant or definitely a university. But they had already recommended that everything be distance. So, and it's not like a virtual hearing. What my experience in teaching in this space is extroverts emerge and all others submerge. And if you're in a hearing or that type of activity, then everyone has a specific role that you have to perform, and so that people do that. But when you're in a large class, then it's only the extroverts who actually engage, and everyone else has the camera off and probably not even there.
Yeah. So you've been teaching from distance for how long already?
Since March.
Oh, since March.
Yeah.
I think that must have been difficult, wasn't it? I mean, like without having to actually engage with your fellow professors and for such a long time.
Yeah, I find it, especially as Veronica knows, having been my student, I like to interact with the students. I like to get a discussion going. And it's difficult when you can't see if they're frowning or they're smiling or nodding their heads. It's difficult to say, well, maybe you can present this or write on the board. So it's very, very stiff. And then I feel like normally I don't use a lot of PowerPoints when I teach because I would like to have a discussion. But I feel like when the students are at home, maybe they need more structure. So I use more PowerPoints. And then when you share your screen, you're really cut off. You're just talking to your screen.
Exactly. Does it turn on the cameras, or is it, you're just talking to a wall, to a screen, to yourself?
Well, most people don't even turn on the cameras, but I've had colleagues, particularly in the United States, who say that the teachers say that it's mandatory that the students are on camera, and it's mandatory that they are not in pajamas, but in regular clothes. And if they're in their student room, then they should not be in the bed sitting on it. The bed should be made. Oh,
So
I
we
got
Expected. So maybe we can start, I think, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Russian Women in Arbitration today. My name is Veronika Borachevska. I'm from Yegorov, Puginsky, Afanasyev and Partners. And let me introduce my colleagues, Yelena Burova from Ivanyan and Partners,
Yeah, hello everyone.
and Tiana Malakhoeva from Brian K. Leighton Eisner.
Hi everyone again.
And I will just also quickly remind you who we are and what we do. So earlier this year, we founded the Russian Women in Arbitration Association as a platform and professional network for promotion of gender diversity in international arbitration in Russia and abroad. We also started a series of online interviews with inspiring women in international arbitration. And today, and I'm particularly honored and pleased to introduce our guest today, Dr. Patricia Shaughnessy, because I was lucky to be one of Patricia's students several years ago. And I was an ICAL LLM student, and this LLM year was one of the greatest years in my life. And Patricia is a founder and creator of this program of International Commercial Arbitration Law LLM program at Stockholm University. She's also a professor at Stockholm University. She teaches international arbitration and related fields both in Sweden and abroad. And prior to her academic career, Patricia was practicing law as an attorney in the United States. Now Patricia acts as an arbitrator and expert in international disputes, as well as consultant for different organizations and bodies, for example, the European Commission. For many years, Patricia was a member of the SSE board and served as its vice chairperson. And actually, Patricia has many more recognitions, memberships, and awards. So Patricia is truly a woman in international arbitration who has inspired many generations of young lawyers, including me, and who continues to inspire young professionals. So we are very, very happy to have Patricia today with us. And we're grateful to you, Patricia, for joining us. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Well, it's really my honor and privilege to be here, and I think it's fantastic that you have taken the initiative to start this organization of Russian Women in Arbitration. And I wish you all the best. I'm sure with all your energy and your talents and vision, it's going to be a huge success.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and I will start the interview with the first questions, and then my colleagues Yelena and Tiana will continue. Mm-hmm. So Patricia, I think it's really difficult to imagine arbitration world without you, either teaching or arbitrating or acting as an expert or just promoting international arbitration worldwide. But if we just go back to where it all started, how did you decide to, and when did you decide to become a lawyer? And were there any other alternatives, other choices?
Well, you have to remember that I'm a bit old. So I graduated from high school in the mid-70s and then started at the university. And when I was younger, I was very involved in different projects to promote development in developing countries such as Guatemala and Mexico, different countries. And so I had some kind of idea I wanted to work in the development field and organize things. And when I got to my university studies, then I ended up gravitating to those courses that were entertaining to me, that I enjoyed. So I ended up with a double major in English literature, because I like to read and write, and also in speech communications, and doing debate club and dramatic readings and things. And so what do you do with that kind of a degree? And at that time, women really were not very professional, and I came from a very middle-class background. I was the first person in my extended family to go to university. And so a professional pathway was not obvious. But I was playing, doing a lot of sports, and I was playing soccer, football on the university team and then a subsequent team. This is a long story. And anyway, my parents were visiting and wondering what I was going to do. And my uncle, anyway, they suggested, why don't you go to law school? Since you like to read and you like to speak. And I went to law school. I didn't know anything about it. I was working as a waitress in a popular Waikiki disco. And I got off work at 5 and went and took the LSAT and sent in an application and didn't think much about that. And off I went to Tahiti with a soccer team. And then we were on our way after Tahiti to go to Bali and to Australia and play football. And when I called home before I left Tahiti, my parents told me that a letter had come from law school and I had been accepted and that they had sent in the deposit. And so I was at the crossroads. Do I go on to Australia and play football, or do I go to law school? And I figured, well, I better go to law school because I'll always wonder about the road not taken, and my parents would be disappointed if I didn't. So I flew back and went off to law school expecting that I would flunk out after the first year. And I was completely oblivious to what was going on in the beginning. Didn't know anything about what was I reading, what are they talking about, what is jurisdiction, what are these words in the book, and but suddenly it clicked after a couple of months, and instead of flunking out, going on to Australia, I found my mission.
This is a great
story. It was very intentional.
Actually, this is so funny. So it was a tiny possibility that we could have a famous football player, Patricia Shaughnessy.
And no, I was never that good. Enthusiastic. Okay. Never very talented.
Yeah, great story. So as we understand, you moved to Sweden from Hawaii, right? Where you were practicing law and teaching at the University of Hawaii. And this is quite a drastic change of, both climate zone and the legal environment. So our question would be, how did your acclimatization go, both professionally and climatically?
Well, all of it, I never have beginnings and endings to my stories. They're always the larger context. So the larger context is that I have been practicing law for 10 years. In a firm that did commercial work and some civil work, and I really enjoyed it. And I was also teaching at the law school as an adjunct, and I had a rich life and activities. And I was unmarried, and I had had some relationships, but nothing that was the wow factor. And I went skiing in Switzerland, and I met my husband at the train station. He was with some friends, and I was, and I was in my young 30s and he was in his young 30s, and neither of us had ever been married. And he was a lawyer. He was a M&A partner in Linkletters. And this was just too wow. And after a year of a long distance relationship, I took a 6-month leave of absence and came to try him out and try living in Sweden now, because he couldn't imagine doing M&A from Hawaii. And then I extended, the firm was really, really cooperative. So we told the clients I was on a leave of absence. My secretaries and paralegals were reassigned, but I had my office there with everything still in the drawers. So I had an easy escape hatch back. So I took a second leave of absence and then decided jobs come and go, but finding your big true love does not come and go. So I decided that I would stay in Sweden. And once I made that commitment, I decided I'm all in. I'm not going to continue to compare and to live the life I used to have, which wouldn't have existed anyway, because all of my friends were starting to get married and settle down and changing lifestyles. So anyway, so that was my segue into it. And so having that mindset, that I think it was easier in some ways that Hawaii was 12-hour time difference and about a 24-hour travel. to get there. So either you're here or you're not here.
And you had a great reason to, there was a great reason to change the environment. But is there anything in Sweden that you still cannot get used to? I mean,
yeah. I mean, there is changes, and let me just make a little quick note. I think it would be more difficult to have made that move if I had only been practicing for 3 or 4 years, because then you would wonder, wow, would I make partner? What kind of cases would I do? Where's my career going? But having practiced in a community, especially even though Honolulu is a big city, it is an island community. You can pretty much guess after 10 years, the next 20 or 30 will be pretty much the same. So I think having already achieved a certain level of experience and recognition made the jump to Sweden easier. And when I came to do while I was here, a research project on arbitration, because I had just recently been certified as an arbitrator. Arbitration was just starting to really boom in Hawaii. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to do arbitration. So I really changed considerably, changed jobs to the university, changed everything. So more to your question, especially in November, I really find the darkness and the barrenness when all the trees have lost their leaves and there's no flowers. It's nicer when the snow comes and it's lighter and you get some crisp, sunny winter days. You can go skiing and such. But the darkness was difficult. And I think that you probably know, Veronica, from being in Stockholm. I don't know how you compare it to Moscow, but people are very, very hospitable and very gracious. But people tend to be very close in their friendships. And in Hawaii, people are very open with the aloha spirit. It's very easy to develop new friendships and for people to become part of your life. But it's much, much more difficult in Sweden. And it's more difficult when you're in your 30s than when you're in your 20s to develop those kind of relationships. So that was a difficulty, but I had the benefit of moving here to a Swede who already had a platform, a social platform that I could share in. But I think it was you probably experienced it a bit of an adaptation, and you too, Elena, from coming to Sweden?
Yeah, I would probably relate to what you have been saying, Patricia. But nevertheless, Sweden provides great opportunities for everyone, and the fact that it's so international, that people are speaking English so great, and that generally there are so many people from all over the world. Like in my program in Uppsala University, we had a very multinational group, so it all makes this transition a little bit smoother. But overall, yes, I agree that Sweden is just a great place to be, but when you have someone, like as in your case, it definitely makes life easier.
Yeah. And I guess for most people, and particularly international arbitration field, there are many people who are practicing outside their jurisdiction and are expats. And I think that most people who are expats find that there are some wonderful opportunities and great things about being an expat, but there are also things that you sacrifice.
Yeah, but I agree that coming back to your point and issue with darkness, I agree that I think it was the most difficult thing to get used to. I mean, the dark autumn, winter season. But yeah, I think the closer we are to Christmas, the better things are getting. Yeah. So Patricia, you built a successful career in a different country with a different language and different legal system. And we were wondering, what do you think was crucial or the most crucial that, helped you to achieve this?
Well, I guess, you have to rise to the challenge. And as Elena pointed out, Sweden has become very international. And it's really exciting. When you walk on the street, you hear different languages spoken. There's lots of opportunities to engage in diverse things. It wasn't quite like that when I came 30 years ago. It's grown a lot. And then I realized when I started studying at the university with my research project, and I found out about an LLM, which I did. And then my husband and I decided to have a family. So I thought it wasn't a good time to try to enter the traditional labor force in terms of trying to both of us being busy lawyers and trying to break into a law firm with those challenges. And because of my interest in research, I decided to do a PhD and got accepted. And I usually say doing PhD studies was a great job when you have small children and a busy husband. And I don't think that the mother should do all the parenting, but 30 years ago, that's a little bit more traditional way it was. But the kids were not great for the job.
Yeah.
So, but it was easier for me to manage committing to the parental role in the university setting than it would have been if I was trying to establish myself in a large law firm doing contentious work. And so I thought that I would probably then go to a law firm because I really enjoyed working in a law firm. But then I started meeting people like you, like all of you, and all the enthusiasm and talent and the energy and that opportunity to be able to work with these talented students and to be surfing on the wave of all of your interests and accomplishments is just fantastic opportunity. So there I stayed.
Yeah. And actually, you mentioned already ICO-LLM program. This is a well-known program, and you founded this program at Stockholm University. And the ICO-LLM graduates, they work in leading law firms all over the world, at universities, in arbitral institutions. But if you could elaborate a little bit more how exactly you came up with the idea of establishing this program, and what are those specifics of this program which distinguish it as compared to other LLM programs in international arbitration?
Well, I thought it was a natural fit to do an LLM in international arbitration. We had some other LLMs, and arbitration is really a profile area for Stockholm, not the least because of the East-West between the Russian, Sweden agreements from the Soviet days and such. And so that, to me, was a natural fit. And when I spoke to other people in the arbitration community and I spoke with my colleagues at university, there seemed to be an interest, and there was great support from the SEC and support from law firms and such. So I proposed this to the faculty, and it got started. So it also provided me with a great platform because it really, since it was just at the starting point, it was quite a tabula rasa. I could create whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that was exciting. And the idea of the program when we got started was that we tried to make it truly international.
And you had a good place for it. I mean, Stockholm, as you mentioned, right, the very international place, and East-West crossing.
Yeah, and one of the things that we could capitalize that really assisted, I think, in establishing the program and also giving the students what they thought was a valuable learning experience is that because there is a robust arbitration community, there are a number of international counsel and arbitrators who would come to Stockholm. This is pre-COVID, of course, for hearings or for seminars. And so I would keep my radar open for who is coming to town and contact them and ask if they would come by the university and give a lecture to the students. And that worked really well because they would end up coming away, big names in the field, and say, what a great group of students. They're so interesting. They're from all over. They asked such great questions. They were so engaged. And then they would tell others that there were these great students in Stockholm. So it was because that got a good traction going. So as a result of that, we could attract more great guest speakers. And that would lead then to getting more great students like you.
Yeah, and I actually, as a former ICO-LLM student, I agree 100% that one of the most interesting things was that we always had, high-profile arbitrators all over the world, academics, lawyers who just came and we had great lectures. So it was really an amazing experience. I mean, yeah. So we felt like we were in one of the international arbitration hubs. Like there were always events, and there was again a great year.
Yeah, and one of your former colleagues, I know that you worked at Vingy for a while with James Hope, who contributes a lot to the program. And James Hope always says the most international place in Sweden is in the ICO classroom because of all of you students. But I guess it's the same in Uppsala with the investment arbitration program that Elena participated in.
But I think maybe I also remember during my year, we had a combination. Sometimes we had joint classes with ICAL program when we came to Stockholm University for a number of workshops, again with guest speakers. This was definitely one of the greatest highlights of the program, and an opportunity to share the experience with the fellow students from ICAL program, to listen just to what's going on in Stockholm. And generally, I think there is a certain synergy between two programs. And I'm not sure how it's going on now, but I think that there is, again, something to build on this synergy and to use it to profit both programs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and now I think Tuyana, right, will continue going deeper into. Hello, Tuyana, we do not hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself and forgot to unmute.
Yeah, we'll continue with, elaborate a little bit more about diversity issues in arbitration.
Thanks, Veronica. So, as Veronica earlier mentioned, for several years for several terms actually, you served as a vice chairperson of the SEC board. And you frequently speak for diversity issues in arbitration, and also participate in some great related initiatives, such as, for example, Arbitral Women. And could you please tell us a bit about how does the SEC approaches the gender diversity issues, and how these attempts are reflected in the statistics of this institution? And maybe you could also share some personal contribution to this matter, as you were a member of the SEC board.
Well, I can say I have long been a huge fan of diversity, and that may be in part from stemming back in Hawaii, where it's a very racially diverse community, where actually Caucasians are in the minority. There's a lot of Japanese and Chinese and such. And when I was a practicing lawyer, I worked at a law firm that was started by Hiram Fong, who was the first U.S. senator of Asian descent. And his partner, Herbert Choi, was the first U.S. Federal Court of Appeal judge of Asian descent. And the firm was Fong, Miho, Okano, and Wong. And I was the first non-Asian that worked in the firm. And I was the first woman lawyer in the firm. And so, and we worked with a lot of Asian clients from across the globe and such. So I think I got this respect and need for diversity. And when I went to law school, there were only a few women in the class, and I had very few women mentors or role models to look up to. So I think that very much influenced my attitude about diversity. And when I came to Sweden, things have changed a lot, I'm quite happy to say. But I really felt, particularly in the classroom, and then that went into the SEC, that my experience is that nationalities, geographics, religion, race, all of those things have absolutely no effect on intellectual ability, agility, ambition, talent. But it does affect opportunities. And in the world of international arbitration, international law, international education, then the bodies that we're working with should reflect that world. It's really a disconnect if we don't see in the classroom that we have a representation of the world that we are exploring and learning and discussing. And in the context of international arbitration, if the institution is not reflecting within its within the arbitrators that it's appointing, the users which are using the institution, that's a disconnect. So the world of international arbitration really needs to be reflected in the institutions and organizations. And as someone has once said, it's not enough to be invited to the party or enough to be invited to come to the event. You need to be invited to dance. You need to be invited to speak. You need to be invited to lead. And so to me, this has been a really important matter that I can't emphasize enough. And I'm so happy. I really thought when I graduated from law school that things were changing. So I thought that as we were going into, leaving the 70s and going into the 80s, and I found it really alarming that things were not changing quicker. But I think we got traction now. But things in the last 5 years have changed. And when the SEC joined the pledge, they really committed to it. They really committed to, when appointing arbitrators on behalf of parties, to really including on the list of candidates to be considered diverse applicants. We've seen a lot of work in the area of gender diversity, but we still need a lot more to be done on geographic and other inclusion efforts.
Yeah. And yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I especially agree that the diversity is not limited to only gender, but also geographic and cultural diversity plays, if not equal, if not more important, but equally important role, and needs to be promoted more in the arbitration. And I will just be coming back to that in a minute, but talking about just continuing on the gender diversity for now, you also were a member of the ICC Cross-Institutional Task Force for Gender Diversity in Arbitral Appointments. And they recently issued a very comprehensive report which analyzed the arbitrator appointment trends and the reasons behind it, as well as even outlined a toolkit for promoting more diversity. And as a member of this of this task force, what do you think were the most important results of this work?
Well, of course, I think the entire work is important, and it tries to stand out as not simply replicating and walking in the path of other reports and initiatives, but trying to really bring things together and to add something. But more specifically to your question, what's the most important? I think perhaps the most important are the toolbox, giving some concrete examples, some concrete ideas about how different firms and organizations can move forward to promote diversity. And so it's actually, what steps can you take? What active initiatives may actually help? And I think that also, hopefully, some of the testimonials, the interviews, and the experiences shared from others who have managed to carve a pathway in this field will also help to inspire and provide some lessons. So that there are, there's a section in the report. What can you do? And I think that's the most important. And hopefully, we'll see that those will grow. That the list of what we can do will grow.
Yeah, and that's great. That it's still people are trying to find different ways to approach this issue, and they are being creative and more and more interested in these issues. So now about geographic diversity. So as I said, it's really an an outstanding. I mean, it's a current issue, and I think even more has to be done in this respect in the arbitration, since it's an international field, and so you need equal international representation. But the reality is somewhat different. And just to provide an example, according to the SEC most recently published statistics for 2019, more than 90 appointed arbitrators were of European nationality, and the representation of other nationalities is really scarce. And in this, well, it's understandable. But if we want to change this, what do you think can be really done, and where do we start in this respect?
Well, let me indicate that the institutions are doing better than party appointments. And if you look at the statistics in terms of different types of diversity, you'll find the least well-performing are when the co-arbitrators appoint a chair. You'll find that's where you have the least diversity. But we're seeing increases of when parties appoint. And hopefully clients are starting now to demand from their counsel that they want to see more diversity, and not just gender, but more diversity. But it's still a problem. And I think that when you look at the statistics of the SEC, that you can make a distinction between when the SEC is appointing and when parties or the co-arbitrators are appointing. But you're right, there still tends to be a European base. And that's something which I find difficult. Part of the reason is that about half of the SEC cases are Swedish cases. Then it's more natural, perhaps, that they might have European-based arbitrators. And half of them are international. And then one of the reasons why you may see that one of the parties who's not from that environment may appoint an arbitrator from their home environment, from if they're a Chinese party, a Chinese arbitrator, or if they're a Russian party, a Russian arbitrator, etc. But it needs to really grow, because one of the questions I ask is, why is it that North American and Northern European arbitrators are frequently appointed in cases that have no connection with North America or Northern Europe? But someone who comes from Russia, or comes from Egypt, or comes from Nigeria, or comes from Brazil, are rarely appointed in cases where there's no connection to their home country or region. And that is a disconnect. There is nothing about an experienced arbitrator from Russia or from Sao Paulo or wherever that makes them more or less capable than one that comes from North America or Northern Europe. And I think that we need to think in broader terms. One positive thing of COVID is that one of the reasons that you see sometimes not greater geographic diversity, which also leads into cultural and perhaps racial and religious diversity, is because of the cost of having an arbitrator who lives far away in a different time zone, being a part of the tribunal and having to fly in a long distance and having to accommodate that. In these COVID times, there's no reason why you can't appoint an arbitrator who is somewhere else, as long as they're willing to deal with the time differences, and the parties often are. And I think that the remote hearing and remote handling of arbitrations can perhaps help us to achieve diversity. But a lot of it's awareness and getting people to think differently.
Yeah, I completely agree. That might be a positive side effect of the COVID-19 and the remote arbitrations. But it really, don't you think it's really it partially comes to the availability availability of information about different arbitrators, and especially Russian arbitrators. Well, I was going to ask you, so since you were for such a long time a member of the SEC board, have you frequently been tasked to appoint arbitrators for some Russian-related disputes? And in this respect, do you think that SEC and maybe other institutions as well could use some more information about different Russian or Russian-speaking arbitrators, and that probably maybe would help them to appoint more Russian nationalities or different other nationalities who certainly have qualified candidates for arbitrators?
Yeah, I think, well, when it comes to the SEC, they probably are a bit more familiar with at least with the more familiar names in the Russian arbitration community, because there has been a long history of interaction, cases, and also seminars, conferences, activities of different nature, so that the more well-known members of the Russian arbitration community are probably pretty well known to Swedish arbitration community, to law firms, to the SEC, to others. And so I think it's perhaps more of a challenge for all of you in the younger generation. How do you get up into that? And for the the younger and the mid-level. So, I mean, of course, everyone knows who Vladimir Kavalay is, and Alexander Komarov and Nina Vilkova. How do you get up to that? And there certainly is a great need for younger arbitrators, and of course for counsel and such in the other bracket. And I think doing events like this, or the organization that you created to promote women in Russian arbitration, I think are great initiatives and needed initiatives. And what the COVID time allows for activities like this, webinars that can get out, but it also makes it more limited to create the kind of networking contacts that will generate into longer term relationships, trust building, name recognition. And what ends up happening, which I have experienced from being on the SEC board, the Secretariat does a great job of trying to come up with suggested names that would be good fits when there's going to be appointed arbitrators, and then presents them to the board, so they're different candidates. But sometimes when you're sitting and then you're thinking, maybe we should have someone who does, XYZ. And while people are sitting and thinking about this, what tends to come to your mind or things which have recently been in your mind. And then maybe later you might come across an email or something a day or two later and think, that person could have been, but it didn't come into your mind then. But what you need to do is to get on the radar. You got to get on the radar and stay on the radar. And you have to do it. There's got to be a degree of self-promotion, but that self-promotion cannot just be a hat you put on. It has to be put on a head that's full of competence, ability, commitment.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely agree, and couldn't say more about that. And would of course love to continue on this, but I would now have to pass the floor, and Elena would just pick up on the following not less interesting issues to discuss.
Yeah. Thank you very much to Jana, and thank you very much, Patricia. Of course, diversity matters and it's really important, but especially today, there are much more fields which are also very exciting to explore and to discuss, and on which we are also very much interested to hear your perspective and your views. So we're now moving from the area of diversity to the section that we called Arbitration Today, which actually comprises a number of issues. And the first one on which we have a question to you, Patricia, relates to your recent engagement with the Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center. So we know that you have been appointed as the head of the task force for tech disputes and technology arbitration of the Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about the general mission of this task force and your personal mission and role in this task force. And a related question is, do you think that the arbitration will have more tech-related disputes in the coming future?
Yes. Well, it's a perfect segue because because I think the future, if we were talking about self-promotion and getting into the field, developing some unique special skills and areas of law and sectors in the industry can be a great way to promote yourself and to be able to become recognized in those areas. And tech is one of those areas. Let me just make one little comment. I'm the co-chair together with Duarte Henriquez and Paul Cohen. So I'm happy to join them in this adventure. The Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center is a nonprofit, kind of a think tank. The idea is to try to promote the arbitration and mediation community in dialogue and collaboration and finding joint areas to engage in. And it's not surprising that the Silicon Valley would attract such a think tank, since that, of course, is in the U.S., where you have a lot of the big, well-known tech companies, although there are some, of course, in Seattle as well. And the tech industry is growing hugely across the globe. So we're seeing, in Singapore and Seoul in India, I'm sure in Russia, you're seeing in Brazil, you're seeing around the world that the tech industry is growing in importance. And there was a sense that the number of disputes that tech companies have, tech-related disputes, are not well represented in arbitration and mediation statistics. And we thought, why is that you would think that the features of arbitration, its characteristics of flexibility, efficiency, speed, etc., would suit well for transnational tech disputes where efficiency, effectiveness, enforcement, all of these things should play largely. So we decided to look into this initially. We made a white paper with some guesses that we made and did some studies and thought, let's have a task force and really investigate this and see how arbitration can better serve the tech industry and how we can explore with the tech companies and different tech disputes what their needs are and what their concerns may be about arbitration. So we're looking forward to exploring this, and we plan to do it in a robust way.
Yeah, sounds impressive, but maybe some concrete practical steps that you can already share that the task force is planning to undertake in the nearest future, and also maybe a question about geographic focus of this survey or studies that you are going to implement. If I understood it correctly, is it more about western part of the world and North America, or is the outreach of this task force and all the efforts is meant to be global and also to expand to Europe and maybe some other parts of the world?
We definitely want to be global. And we also want to be sure that the task force is not only people from the arbitration community. We want to be sure that we also have people from the tech. And we want it to be diverse in the sense that we want to have younger and more senior people with different backgrounds. So we're trying to be diverse. We have three basic streams of work that we're looking at. We had the first task force meeting just on Monday evening, so we're kind of at an early stage here. One of the main things that we're going to do is do a robust, methodologically reliable survey of users, and we want that to be a global survey. And then another stream of work is going to be trying to take a snapshot, trying to find out what initiatives are going on, what are the statistics. We suspect that many arbitral institutes may not actually be reflecting how many tech disputes they actually have. As we were discussing, maybe it's a tech company, but it's a SPA dispute. And so maybe it gets registered at the Arbitral Institute as a M&A dispute. rather than, so we're going to explore all of this, and we're going to see what other kind of initiatives are being done. Unsatrala is kind of looking into some things now. And then we have another stream of work, which is going to be having dialogue with that community, doing interviews, doing town halls and meetings. We're going to be, as our work progresses, we would like to have it out for public comment. And I can mention as a footnote, when younger lawyers or even midstream lawyers find out that there are different types of initiatives like this task force or other ones, and you're thinking, that's interesting, I'm really interested in that. Don't be afraid to reach out. Find out who's behind it. Send a message saying, I'm really interested. There's always room for people who are willing to do some work, particularly if you bring, as you do in Russia, access to information and practice developments which may not be easy for others to access. So don't be afraid to say, I would like to get involved. And that can be one of those ways that you start to develop your profile and your expertise and your network. So don't wait for people to knock on your door.
Yeah, that's actually, you provided me a great segue to the next question that we wanted to ask you. And this question relates to networking in the times of COVID-19, because probably the younger generation and those who are aspiring to grow in the field of international arbitration right now are the ones who suffer, or let's say, face the bigger challenges that are resulting from COVID pandemics, because the networking and generally the professional interaction, the opportunities to engage with the community are becoming relatively scarce now, or they are transformed in some other virtual way. And of course, we all understand that nothing can replace human-to-human interaction and engaging. As you yourself pointed out, nothing can replace the interaction with students during teaching process. So our question to you is, do you think that after this COVID-19 pandemic ends, the traditional understanding of networking will be somehow reconsidered? And we mean networking in the field of arbitration, of course. And the next question, maybe you can provide some tips or maybe recommendations to younger generation, how they can tackle these challenges that arise out of the lack of opportunities to network in person, to attend the events, to engage with potential employers. Of course, you already mentioned that it's important to be proactive and it's important to reach out, to find initiatives which can be particularly interesting to you and where you can maybe contribute somehow. But generally, your perspective to it would be really appreciated, because as I told Veronica, I see you, if I may, as a networking guru in the field of arbitration. So your views are very much appreciated here.
Well, I often say to my students, I picked this up someplace, I heard it years and years ago, but I guess I've minted it my own. Your network is your net worth, particularly as a lawyer. Networking, I think, is important. And that's partly because our community is very much based upon relationships and trust and things. And then within the international arbitration community, you see repeat players. It's not like one deal, you'll never see that lawyer again. So it is important to build up relationships and trust and to develop your reputation. Reputation is really important. So in the time of COVID, there are opportunities and there are real barriers. So the opportunities is so many webinars that you can now attend without having to go to your firm and say, can I have two or 3 days off? Would you pay for me to go to Zurich to stay in a nice hotel? And they'll say, no, we don't do that for associates. They should do more. I hope after COVID, firms, the firms spend so much money to recruit talent, and they spend a lot of internal resources to develop that talent. Why don't they support the talent going out and building their network and developing their business and brand? So that's something for the partners to think about. But in many firms, it's only the partners that get to go off to the exciting events. So you have the advantage now in the webinar, but still, I don't see the participants who are listening to us today. They don't see me. If this was a real event, we would go and have a coffee break and people could come up and chat and somebody would stand up and make a question. Let me note, never hesitate to stand up and ask a question or make a comment at a conference. Even if there is a chat function, put it in the chat function. Start to take the stage, start to make your voice be heard. You have every right to be at the table and participating as anyone else, and use that. Don't be too shy. Don't be pushy either. But I think after this COVID time, that we're going to find that the world is going to be hybrid. I think that everyone is eager to go back to having things as normal, live meetings, live hearings, live interactions. But I think that we've now seen that there's a lot that we can do and maybe even do it better and more inclusively in this framework. So I think we're going to see it's going to be a mix. In the meantime, many law firms have cut back on their hiring. And when they're doing hiring, already before the COVID, there was a lot of initial interviews being done by Skype or Zoom or some other session, so that you didn't get to a face-to-face interview if you didn't make it through the remote interview. So work on your remote interviewing skills if you don't already have a job or you're looking, because it's a slightly different way to try to connect in this kind of space. And so that's important. And take advantage of different opportunities that come up. If there are areas that you're interested in, attend webinars. If you found it interesting, and I'm not suggesting that people be pesky, but most people who have written about or spoken about or published on different topics are really interested in that. And they really like it when somebody's read it and are interested. I have often followed up to someone and said, I really enjoyed the paper you presented, or would you mind sharing your PowerPoint slides? I won't share them with anyone, but I'd like to see your sites, or could you send me that case or make a comment? And I think I've almost always gotten a response, even from pretty senior people who I won't name now, but have high name recognitions, have answered me. I did it when I was young and unknown, and I still do it. Most people like being able to send their paper, or like getting some feedback, or say, well, I thought this thing that you said on the webinar is really interesting, but I was kind of wondering, what about this? So don't hesitate to be interactive even in this space. Again, that's not an invitation to start stalking people. And it might be, if you hear that someone is doing a research project, that you might be able to say, I understand that you're doing this research project on this. I would be happy if you're interested in contributing some things from Russia, or some things that I gained. I worked on a case recently and got some insights. Don't share confidential information, of course.
Yeah, that's all really, practically oriented. And thank you very much for sharing these recommendations with us and our audience. And let me maybe also use this opportunity to remind our audience that we have the Q&A toolbox here. And I see that there is already one question from Kristina Hribkova, who is also an ICAL alumna. As I remember, hi Christina, it's nice to have you, but we'll move to it a bit later when we have a separate part of our session for it. Maybe the last question from this Arbitration Today section that we have also relates to another aspect of COVID-19 and its influence and impact on the arbitration and the industry in general. So do you think that the international arbitration has successfully adjusted to the challenges that COVID-19 brought with it? And do you think that moving some part of proceedings like hearings into virtual space can sufficiently address due process concerns that may rise out of it. And also, the next question that relates to this topic, do you expect that in the future, after COVID-19 pandemic ends, we can face a general move towards bigger digitalization of arbitration?
I think that the arbitration community has done a really fantastic job of accommodating and adjusting very quickly to the COVID situation. We're known to be a pretty conservative and slow-moving community that does not easily take disruptive innovations on board. But it's amazing. I did a chapter in the book that was recently published by Wolters Kluwer on COVID-19 by Severance, and I was given the chapter on initiating and administrating arbitrations. And I thought, oh my goodness, we had to submit this in July already. So we only had like 5 weeks or something to put this together. And I thought, how am I going to come up with anything on this? And I reached out to 20 arbitration institutes and got answers very quickly back from all of them. Some been more detailed than others, where they shared their experience. And the take home from that is it was really impressive how quickly arbitration institutes realized that they needed to quickly convert, to take leadership, to provide information to users and cases that were already going on, to arbitrators, to the council, to the parties, to cases that were going to be filed, to be able to seamlessly as possible continue the administration of the cases. And in the beginning, you may remember, there were even challenges that when an arbitration institute would need to send out a request for arbitration and serve it on the respondent, typically they would do it with a courier service. And some parts of the world, the courier services were not delivering couriers. Things that might have taken 2 days would take 2 weeks. It was a lot of challenges, and I'm very impressed how institutions, law firms, the users, the clients, adapted to it. So in the beginning, when people didn't know, how long is this going to be? Oh, we're going to all be flying around and having hearings again. We'll just postpone. And then when it became more apparent this wasn't going to go away early, I think some of the foot drag or some of the reluctance about converting, they say necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
It forced us all to have to make the change. And I think it's gone pretty smoothly. Of course, there are challenges. There are challenges, and one needs to respect that not everyone has the same access to technology. And it's not just a matter of developed and non-developed worlds. Even in some parts of the developed world, the bandwidth and the internet connections are not quite good. People who are working in particularly big cities, they may be living in small apartments with families and small children who are not in school. It's not easy to be doing a 1-week arbitration hearing when you have a 3 and 5-year-old playing around your feet and you have your laptop, on top of the ironing board. And I mean, these are real challenges that one needs to respect, and having a team being able to prepare witnesses and the issues about the witnesses not being too coached. So I think that one should not just say, yeah, no problem. You can get out your iPhone and have a hearing. But fortunately, there's a lot of advice. There have been a lot of guides. There's a lot of arbitration institutes and organizations and firms that have published things. There's different procedural orders that go through. And like many challenging events, preparation. Plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. Expect the worst and hope for the best. And know what's going to happen. And particularly, one can anticipate there may be disruptions in the middle of it. But as people become more accustomed, and it's a bit like, I think that you can accommodate due process, but there can be certain situations where it's very, very difficult for a party to legitimately feel that they're able to adequately present their case in the space. And so that needs to be addressed. And some of the hearing centers have moved over to providing remote administrative services. That can help, but it also comes at a cost. But maybe the cost is offset by not having arbitrators flying to and parties and witnesses to stay in hotels and such. So I think it's worthwhile to consider administrative services to help support the remote hearing. But I think that people need to plan, and they need to take seriously the concerns that some parties have about whether or not they're able to adequately participate.
Mhm.
I think most of the barriers can be met with creativity, tools we have, and preparation.
Indeed. Could not agree with you more, especially about preparation.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Patricia, do you think that the arbitral institutions would put more efforts into, all possible ways of digitalization of the arbitral proceedings? I mean, it's just something that I was thinking about when, taking into account all the pandemic situation, whether the arbitral institutions would, invest into transferring proceedings to virtual space.
Yeah, I think that arbitration institutions have a natural leadership and visionary role in this space. And most arbitration institutions, and indeed I would hope all, see their business ideas serving the business community. And most of them are nonprofit and independent, neutral. The ideas are in service industry. And as such, they should be the leaders in providing the services. The SEC, I think, did an impressive job of creating a document uploading communication platform, which is pretty easy to use. And that is where everything it facilitates this remote handling, because you can do all the calendaring. Everything is uploaded, messages, procedural orders, submissions, the award. We also now have electronic signature developments that are going on. So these things are all helping, and we see the new additions of rules reflecting that technology is included. So through the rules, through the guides. So I think institutes have a definite role to play and should play. And most institutions today, internal work is all done through computer working. They're not using paper and files, but they're communicating internally and managing through computer systems and database systems. But when it comes to the actual digitalization, if you have some arbitration institutes, for example, at Hong Kong and Singapore and others, that have hearing centers that have become quite digital and providing a lot of digital services. Others don't have that. One of the things when you come into the digitalization of the actual hearing platform and all of that, and getting into the cybersecurity and the data protection and all of that, it can be difficult for an arbitration institute to have a service that's going to suit all needs, a one-size-fits-all. One, from a budgetary concern, from the IT support that most arbitration institutions have accessible to assist them, will be at a lower level than big major law firms and big clients. And so if you're going to say the Arbitration Institute is going to provide all that digitalization, then you may have to be satisfied that it's not going to be as upscale and as your client or your firm may want to have. So I think it's that the institutions should interface and they should encourage, but I think that in large, complex, highly confidential, you have big data rooms, a lot of encrypted documents and all of that kind of in data centers. I think that's going to be done by the law firms, and then they can engage and consult with external consulting firms that provide those services, and they can choose and procure the services that are suited for the case. I think very few arbitral institutions are going to be prepared to start becoming information technology providers. and cybersecurity providers. The maintenance of such systems, the service of such systems, most institutions don't have the resources, and they cannot do a bespoke system for every user in every case. But maybe I'm looking at it from the perspective of an older person. Maybe technology is moving so quickly that you'll be able to do bespoke add-on app things cheaply and easily.
Yeah, maybe life will make us, make us to digitalize more. Yeah.
So we can now probably move to the last section of our video session, and for time purposes I suggest that perhaps we maybe move directly to Q&A, because we already have a number of questions from our attendees, and we have two questions actually from Miss Kristina Hripkova, and they are related to a certain extent, so maybe I will ask them to Patricia together, both these questions. So first question that Christina asks is, how did Patricia get her first arbitrator appointment? And the second question from Christina, it's also related to a certain extent. What Patricia could advise to young lawyers who are seeking tribunal secretary appointments, yet partners at their law firms either do not serve as arbitrators or serve under the rules that do not generally allow to appoint tribunal secretaries, like the rules of Ukrainian International Commercial Arbitration Courts. So two broad areas: first, arbitration appointment, and first appointment as a tribunal secretary.
Well, if we go back to the very first, back in the mid-'80s, I got certified as an arbitrator in connection with a program that the Hawaii State was doing, that if you had a civil case, then it had to go through an arbitration or mediation before you could go to a court. And so there was arbitrators that were certified to do that. And so that's how I got the first case. But if you're speaking about in the international space, when I came to Sweden, the first case came from an institution. And so I was appointed as a sole arbitrator by the institution, and then that led to a couple more cases, and I think that's for many, particularly I would say for women, and particularly for non-counsel, and particularly for foreigners. You're maybe not as likely to get appointments from the local counsel, and because local counsel know each other better from being in cases with each other. So as a foreigner, a woman, an academic, you're more likely to get your early appointments from institutions. And the second question was about serving as a secretary?
Yeah, the second question was about what would be your advice to young lawyers who are seeking tribunal secretary appointments, yet partners at their law firms either do not serve as arbitrators or serve as arbitrators under the rules that do not provide for engagement of tribunal secretaries.
Yeah, that can be kind of tough. And again, it's partly networking. If somebody is aware of the fact that you're interested and able to take appointments, they may assume as you're at a law firm that you're not able to take appointments because of potential conflicts. Appointments as a secretary. One thing you can do is let institutions know that if any tribunals are interested in a secretary, that you're willing and able. And they may find that if it's a case, now I'm saying that in Christina's case that she's in Ukraine, or in your case, Elena, that you're in Russia, say if it's a case that involves a lot of Russian documents or Russian whatever, and you need somebody to organize these, because of course you're going to be doing administrative things. And I have those language skills, and I have arbitration skills, and I'd be happy to serve as a secretary if a tribunal is looking. But it can be challenging. Today, oftentimes the tribunals like to use secretaries which are physically close to them. Maybe that's changing now in time of COVID. But it used to be they'd like somebody who they can walk into the office and say, "Here, can you put this bundle together? Can you photocopy it or whatever? Can you book this?" But things are changing a bit in time of COVID. And I guess maybe tell the partners in your law firm that you would like to get experience by acting as a secretary, and could those partners, when they interact with senior counsel and arbitrators from other firms, let them know that you are available and you are competent and you are interested. And there are some courses that you can take. There's not very many on secretary training. I would definitely get involved in some of the different organizations like Young ICCA, Young OJMID, the AISHA, the International Young Lawyers Association. So there are different organizations where you can start to network and become known. And then hopefully, I know I've had occasion, I won't say when or where, I've had occasion a couple of times where a tribunal has asked me if I could recommend a secretary. It doesn't happen very often. It's more often they call me and say, we're thinking about appointing Elena. What do you know about her? But occasionally I've been asked about, could you recommend a secretary? And then I've been able to say, I'm aware of person X, but I would never recommend somebody who I didn't actually have personal experience and confidence in. I'm very, very reluctant to, if I don't have 100% confidence. And if somebody is that I'm aware of and I'm not sure of, then I'll pick up the telephone or send emails and ask about information about that person. So, arbitrator intelligence is trying to move us into the area of information which is actually processed rather than through the telephone and email. And maybe we're moving into that space, more transparent, accountable, but the telephone and the email remains one of the sources of information that's important for secretary appointments and arbitrator appointments.
Yeah, that's true. Patricia, we also have 2 more questions for you, but we see that our time that we initially allocated for this video session has elapsed. Would you allow us to ask you 2 more questions?
Oh, sure.
Oh, thank you very much. So these questions, they are from miscellaneous section, let's call it like that. And we all know that you have been an example to a number of students and young lawyers, but you yourself, have you ever had a role model?
Not really. And it's one of the great things that I'm quite sad about, because when I was a young lawyer, there were so few women lawyers, and at that time, firms, at least the firms that I was working with, they were not as good about fostering and such. They were kind of thrown into the swimming pool, expected to swim. But I did get involved, for example, as a young lawyer, that to bridge that gap. I got involved, for example, with the Trial Lawyers Association. I started to attend their things, and then through that started to network. I wasn't actively networking, but it was just kind of natural. And going to some of the training programs, that I would start talking with some of the trainers, some of the more senior, and then they would invite me to participate in something or get invited to maybe be on a panel or something. And then getting involved in the local bar association. So I got on the board of the continuing legal education and being an adjunct at the university. So none of these things are very intentional. I just kind of seemed natural in that space. But that provided me a kind of mentoring, because it gave me an opportunity to have a more collegial dialogue with experienced people who are willing to share.
Yeah, which is also great, and which can be replaced by anything probably. I mean, personal interaction. Okay, so our last question, which we usually ask all our female speakers with whom we have interviews, and we will not betray this tradition, and we will also ask this question to you. If you could travel back in time, and if you could meet yourself as a young practitioner, what career advice would you give to yourself? And related question, what career advice would you give to young female arbitration practitioners of nowadays?
Well, I feel like my career and path has been, as you probably have already gained, it's not been very intentional. It's not been very focused. It's not that I have set out, these are the things that I want to accomplish. And I haven't really explored what are the things. So I've just kind of taken the next step, and then things have interested me, and I've rolled up my sleeves and gotten involved and enjoyed it. So I might say I should be a little bit more intentional and a little bit more planning about how my career is developing. On the other hand, I'm kind of happy that I wasn't overly planning, because a lot of fun, exciting things have happened to me personally and professionally that probably never would have happened had I been too focused on a plan. So I guess I would tell myself, you could plan a little more, but keep some of that spontaneity. And I've always been very people-driven. And I tell my children this, and this would be the advice I would give my young self then. The thing that impresses me most about my children, including my arbitration children, and that's everyone who I've been a teacher to, is the thing that I get most impressed with them is their ability to foster and to build relationships, professional relationships, work relationships, friendships. And that ability to be able to build meaningful relationships is going to be the secret to your happiness and your health. And so being a good colleague, being a good friend, being engaged, caring about the things you're doing. And maybe last, I borrowed this from somebody who I admire, Chris Campbell, a young lawyer at Baker Hughes in Florence, in-house. He said in an event once that he once was told, in order to be successful, you need a lot of luck. But the harder you work, the more lucky you seem to be.
Yeah, indeed. I also agree with that. So, okay, I will maybe, thank you very much, Patricia, first of all. I will maybe now pass the floor to Veronica to give some concluding remarks, right?
Yeah. I mean, the main remark is thank you, Patricia, for this very insightful and interesting conversation. And thank you for joining us again. And we are very glad that we have this interview and that you managed to inspire even more people. And we hope that sooner or later we will be able to also organize offline events, and you will also join us here in Moscow or anywhere in the world where we will organize our offline events, hopefully soon. So thank you.
Good. I'm looking forward to following all the success. I think it's terrific what you guys are doing. You really are the future of international arbitration. So thank you for contributing so much to it.
Thank you very much, Patricia. It's been a pleasure today to interview you, as usual.
Pleasure's mine.
To all participants, to the audience, and see you again later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.